Give me a little bit of history about the railroad police, since I don't know anything about it, and I'm sure people are watching it just like I am. What? Tell me how they came about.
In 1849, in Maryland, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Now, between 1830 and 1835, you had two states, Maryland and South Carolina, that started railroads. By 1850, you had 8 other states and 1,000 miles of main line. In 1849, an engineer, Benjamin Latrobe, had a strike on his hands. And the leaders of the union were assaulting workers that were coming to work. So he got with Sheriff Martin of Acton, Preston County, which is now West Virginia. The sheriff gave him a bunch of deputies, and they arrested the leaders of the union, and a lot of problems went away. So the engineer said, man, I need my own police department. So he hired 12 guys that were paid for by the railroad. But he went to his friend, Sheriff Martin, and they were deputized through his department. So any acts that they did were covered under the law. So it's funny because that was in 1849. In 1979, we did the same thing because we only had powers on property at the time. We couldn't follow our crimes. So we had Jefferson Parish commissions, we had special officer commissions in New Orleans. So we would do similar things. So anyway, he hired 12 men, and they were there to protect the railroads against strikers, against thieves, and all that, and was successful. So by 1853, he had a 60-man police department. But it wasn't until the 70s, after the Civil War, and at the time that we had the outlaws, the train robbers, that the Western railroads realized they needed policemen. They needed, which became special agents. Now, before that, railroads were hiring what they call watchmen. These were guys, a lot of times they were employees that they got hurt and they couldn't do their jobs anymore. And they worked the railroad yards strictly to protect the railroad yards. They weren't investigators. Pinkerton, Alan Pinkerton, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the father of railroad police. I believe it was 1851 was when he was first hired by a railroad to do investigations and to protect the railroads. And he used undercover agents as employees, as conductors, to watch for thieves and to watch for other employees stealing. He hired people to act as tramps to watch the employees to see if they were stealing. And any other major investigation, the railroads were and still do, but they shipped back then gold, silk, tobacco, and they were mostly protecting also the yards, but doing the investigations. Pinkerton said he hired ex-law enforcement, and he said he had to teach them how to detect. So the art of detection, the art of investigation. And he was good at it. By 1865, I think it was, he was employed by 7 or 8 railroads doing their investigations. So the first train robbery, the gangs, the Jesse James, the Reno brothers and all that, they would break into trains, but they would break into trains in the yards that weren't traveling. 1866, the Reno brothers and one of their good friends, Sparks, boarded a train in Seymour, Indiana, and waited for it to leave. And then they forced their way into the express car with masks on. They knocked out the guard. Before they knocked him out, he opened up a local safe that had, I think, 13,000 in it. Then they had a bigger safe that they couldn't open, and the guard didn't have the key to. So they knocked him out. They opened the doors. They pushed the safe out where a couple other Reno brothers and the rest of the gang was waiting to take the stash. So that was your first train robbery. And Pinkerton was called, and he knew that nothing happened in Seymour without the Reno brothers knowing about it. So he put one of his best undercover agents, a guy by the name of Dick Winscott, as a bartender at the bar where they drank and gambled. And Dick worked there for a while. And one day a photographer walked in while the Reno brothers and the gang was there. Bartender talked them into taking a photograph. Well, the photographer was an undercover agent. So they took the picture, immediately sent it to the headquarters of Pinkertons, and Alan Pinkerton showed it to the guard who was knocked unconscious. He identified them as the train robbers. So for the next bunch of years, you had a bunch of gangs robbing the trains. They were killing employees, they were killing passengers, they were robbing the freight, they were robbing jewelry and money from the passengers. So Pinkerton was active, and the Union Pacific hired or promoted Bill Canada. Back then, each area had the, say Union Pacific, each area had their police department. They weren't under one umbrella. They weren't under one chief. In 1891, when Bill Canada was promoted or hired, he was the chief. And he was told by E.H. Harriman, I don't care what you do, you got to stop these train robberies. So he put together the Bandit hunters, which was he hired the fastest horsemen, the best shooters, the best trackers, gave them the best weapons and the best horses. They had a train that was stationed out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. It had an engine, a dining car, a sleeper car, and a specialized luggage car that was stalls for the horses. And it had a telegrapher assigned to them. If they had a train robbery, the telegrapher would get the information, tell the crew, the bandit hunters and the engineer, they would go as quick as they could to the scene of the crime. Special agents, the bandit hunters, would come off on horseback and start chasing these guys. And sometimes they chased them for hundreds of miles. So while you had the Pinkertons, you had the bandit hunters, the Missouri Pacific under Chief Thomas Furlong had the secret police, and they were made to be like the Pinkertons. They were more investigators, more undercover. Between these three groups, they put an end to the train robbers. But you had three Pinkertons that were killed, you had railroad policemen that were killed in shootouts with these guys.
So, obviously, I've watched a lot of Western movies where you got train robberies and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and stuff. Back in those days, obviously you're robbing for safes and stuff. I'm assuming Amtrak wasn't around where you're having passenger cars. Were people having passenger cars?
Your first trains were mostly passengers.
Okay.
It was passengers and freight mixed.
Okay.
So you might have, they were all small trains, 4 or 5 cars, but you'd have 1 or 2 passenger cars with a dining car, and then you'd have freight cars. So they were doing everything. They were stealing the freight and stealing from the passengers. And a lot of times, like I say, getting shootouts with passengers and conductors and engineers. And so we had a lot of people getting killed doing those robberies.
By the time that you start working for the railroad police, are there passenger cars, or is that just strictly Amtrak?
When I started, it was strictly Amtrak. Yeah, I think it was, well, the 50s brought the interstate system.
Yeah.
All railroads had passenger trains. But when the interstate system started, passenger ridership went way down. So it took a while, but gradually railroads did away with their passenger trains. And that's why you have Amtrak, because all the railroads did away with passenger trains. Now you do have New York, Chicago, California. You do have your subway police. You have passenger
Yeah.
trains that run from one point to another, and you have railroad police protecting them.
Right.
You know, we have Chicago, we have our freight railroad police also do the passengers. They swap from time to time. But Amtrak is your biggest passenger, and they have a large police department. They are well equipped. They have helicopters. They have huge buses. They have a good police department.